Part 1.
You will hear a woman telephone a company that organizes extreme sports activities. She wants information about a possible birthday present for her dad. First, you will get some time to look at questions 1 to 10.
Hello, Grayson's Adventure Days. How can I help you?
Oh, good morning. I want to book an activity day as a birthday present for my father. So could you give me an idea of the sorts of things you organise, please?
What a great present. Do you want the activity to take place in a particular location?
No, anywhere in the country would be okay.
Right. Well, how about bungee jumping? That's our most popular activity.
Uh-huh.
After a safety briefing, you're securely fastened to the correct bungee rope for your weight. Then the crane takes you up to a height of 50 meters in a cage, and you jump from it.
You make it sound so easy.
In fact, some people change their minds at the last moment. But for the really brave, you can also book our special, which is one normal bungee jump and then a backwards one. It's quite an experience.
I can imagine. Is it available every day?
We do bungee jumping all year round on over 120 dates and in various locations. But you should try to book about 4 weeks in advance if possible, as it's very popular.
Okay. And are there any age restrictions? It'll be my father's 50th birthday, so I hope he isn't too old.
No, he certainly isn't too old, but we'll require a certificate from a doctor to confirm that he's in good health.
Oh, he's very fit, so that won't be a problem. How much is it?
It costs £57 per person for the standard jump and £97 for the special.
Right. Now, I've heard of something called zorbing. Do you do that too?
Yes, we do. That's another very popular activity.
What exactly is it?
Well, you're securely attached in the centre of a zorb, either alone or with another person. A zorb is over 3 meters high and it consists of one ball inside another, both made of clear plastic so you can see out through them.
And what happens next?
You roll down a hill at speeds of up to 50 kilometers an hour. You can also choose the hydrozorb experience, where 25 liters of water is thrown inside with you, and you aren't attached, so you slide around in the water while you're rolling.
Wow, I'm sure my father would enjoy that. What about the dates?
The zorb rides take place between April and October, but just at weekends.
Are there any restrictions? I mean, for height or weight?
Your father needs to be at least 160 centimeters tall and weigh no more than 110 kilos.
Oh, that's fine. How much does it cost?
Zorbing is £50 per person.
And is hydrozorbing the same price?
No, that's £65.
Right. I'd better give my father details of both the bungee jumping and zorbing and let him choose, and then I'll get back to you.
Fine. We tend to get fully booked, especially at this time of year, so you ought to book well in advance.
OK, I'll get back to you in the next few days. Thanks very much for your help.
No problem. Bye.
Bye.
That is the end of Part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 2.
Part 2. You will hear a bank manager talking about money management. First, look at questions 11 to 15.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to one of the Hong Kong's bank's lectures on money management. I'm John Rogers, and I'm the manager here. Money, they say, makes the world go round. Well, it is true that your world can come to a grinding halt if you have no money. I know you all agree, because that is why you have come here today. Okay, money. What do we want to do with it? Most people want to enjoy the money they earn today, but also put some aside for a rainy day, the kids' education, that big house in the country you've always dreamed of, and, of course, retirement. In other words, they want to invest it. So let's talk for a little while on spending money wisely today, and then I'll talk about the various types of investment you can make. The first question is, how much of your income should you enjoy spending today, and how much should you save for the future? And the answer is different for different people. It depends on things like age, your health, how many children you have, etc. Well, my initial answer is, write out a budget for the necessities: food, rent, mortgage, and loan payments, clothing, health insurance, things like that. When most people do this, they say to themselves, "My goodness, I really only need to spend £1,500 a month. So how come I always spend nearly £2,500? My mother used to tell me, look after the pennies and the pounds will look after themselves." What to do? Discipline. I suggest you take out the cash you need every week from the bank and keep a record of what you buy with your credit card. And you must strictly limit what you spend every month to, for example, your budget for essentials, plus an amount, say 10%, for a bit of entertainment if you want, and the unexpected, like house repairs, that birthday present you forgot about, things like that. If after 3 weeks you find that you have nearly spent your budget for the month, then stay at home for a week. No fancy restaurants or drinking with the boys. As they say, there's no free lunch.
As the talk continues, answer questions 16 to 20.
Okay, so what do you do with the money you don't spend? Oh, one thing I forgot to mention. It's a good idea to always have some money in a current deposit at the bank in case of big surprises. Say 1,000 or so. Don't be tempted to use your credit card unless you absolutely have to. And get that safety cushion back in the bank as soon as you can. Right. So, what should you invest in? The list is endless. Real estate, stocks and shares, equity funds. Did I hear someone say gambling? Well, if you have a crystal ball, maybe. The government lottery? Someone once described it as a voluntary tax on fools. But I must admit I spend £1 or £2 on it every week, but no more. It brings a little bit of excitement into my life, even though I know I have a better chance of being struck by lightning than winning. Okay, let's start off with a basic principle. In general, the higher the potential for making a fortune by buying shares of a particular company, the one you have been told will be the next IBM in 3 weeks, the higher the risk. We've all heard about the dot-com bubble of several years ago. Some people made a fortune, but they got out before the market crashed. The majority of investors lost their shirts. Another basic principle, the balanced portfolio. A balanced portfolio means you have investments in a variety of things, from low-risk but low-return things to things like blue-chip stocks that are somewhat less predictable, but which will probably provide steady, if not spectacular, returns for years, to the riskiest of all, venture capital, where success could increase the value of your investment 100-fold, or failure could wipe it out. Well, why don't we break for a coffee now? Then I will talk about the most common form of share ownership, common stock, which makes you become a part owner of the company itself, with voting rights and entitlement to dividend distribution if there is one.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
Part 3.
You are going to hear from 2 English students named Kathy and Graham. They are planning a display for their university event. First, you will get some time to look at questions 21 to 24.
OK, Graham, so let's check we both know what we're supposed to be doing.
OK.
So, for the university's open day, we have to plan a display on British life and literature in the mid-19th century.
That's right. But we'll have some people to help us find the materials and set it up, remember? For the moment, we just need to plan it.
Good. So, have you gathered who's expected to come and see the display? Is it for the people studying English or students from other departments? I'm not clear about it.
Nor me. That was how it used to be, but it didn't attract many people, so this year it's going to be part of an open day to raise the university's profile. It'll be publicised in the city to encourage people to come and find out something of what goes on here, and it's included in the information that's sent to people who are considering applying to study here next year.
Presumably, some current students and lecturers will come?
I would imagine so. But we've been told to concentrate on the other categories of people.
Right. We don't have to cover the whole range of 19th century literature, do we?
No, it's entirely up to us. I suggest just using Charles Dickens.
That's a good idea. Most people have heard of him and have probably read some of his novels or seen films based on them. So that's a good lead-in to life in his time.
Exactly. And his novels show the awful conditions that most people had to live in, don't they? He wanted to shock people into doing something about it.
Did he do any campaigning other than writing?
Yes, he campaigned for education and other social reforms and gave talks. But I'm inclined to ignore that and focus on the novels.
Yes, I agree.
Before you hear the rest of the recording, you will get some time to look at questions 25 to 30.
OK, so now shall we think about a topic linked to each novel?
Yes, I've printed out a list of Dickens's novels in the order they were published, in the hope you'd agree to focus on him.
You're lucky I did agree. Let's have a look. OK, the first was The Pickwick Papers, published in 1836. It was very successful when it came out, wasn't it? And was adapted for the theatre straight away.
There's an interesting point, though, that there's a character who keeps falling asleep, and that medical condition was named after the book, Pickwickian syndrome.
Oh, so why don't we use that as the topic and include some quotations from the novel?
Right. Next is Oliver Twist.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot in the novel about poverty, but maybe something less obvious.
Well, Oliver is taught how to steal, isn't he? We could use that to illustrate the fact that very few children went to school, particularly not poor children, so they learnt in other ways.
Good idea. What's next?
Maybe Nicholas Nickleby? Actually, he taught in a really cruel school, didn't he?
That's right. But there's also the company of touring actors that Nicholas joins. We could do something on theatres and other amusements of the time. We don't want only the bad things, do we?
OK.
What about Martin Chuzzlewit? He goes to the USA, doesn't he?
Yes. And Dickens himself had been there a year before and drew on his experience there in the novel.
I wonder, though. The main theme is selfishness. So we could do something on social justice? No, too general. Let's keep to your idea. I think it would work well.
He wrote Bleak House next. That's my favourite of his novels.
Yes, mine too.
Oh.
His satire of the legal system is pretty powerful.
That's true. But think about Esther, the heroine. As a child, she lives with someone she doesn't know is her aunt, who treats her very badly. Then she's very happy living with her guardian, and he puts her in charge of the household. And at the end, she gets married, and her guardian gives her and her husband a house, where, of course, they're very happy.
Yes, I like that.
What shall we take next? Little Dorrit? Old Mr. Dorrit has been in a debtor's prison for years.
So was Dickens's father, wasn't he?
That's right.
What about focusing on the part when Mr. Dorrit inherits a fortune and he starts pretending he's always been rich?
Good idea.
OK. So next we need to think about what materials we want to illustrate each issue. That's going to be quite hard.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4. You are going to hear a lecture about various issues in land management and ownership systems by Professor Fred Roberts. You now have some time to read questions 31 to 40.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all looking so full of energy. Today I'm going to give an overview of some general principles and issues relating to land management and ownership. Very important. If we look at history, it seems that much of it concerns conflict over religion, economic power and land. Often all three factors are involved together. The first question one asks when talking about land is, who owns it? What you can do with land you own depends on one's political views. A far-right conservative may say ownership is the socially supported power to do what you want with the land you own. with no control by government as long as what you do with it doesn't hurt others. You can imagine how different factions interpret hurt others. By contrast, the political left, socialists and, more to the left, communists say land ownership, private land ownership that is the root cause of much injustice in the world, and that the social protection of private land ownership can result in tyranny and oppression. They therefore argue for state, public and cooperative forms of land ownership. I would mention here that most of us take for granted the idea that everything must be owned by a person, people or an organisation. But some societies, notably some native North American tribes, seem to have no concept of personal ownership. It was normal for them simply to take anything they needed and for others to take it from them if they needed it. When European settlers came, the Indians behaved as usual, which led the Europeans to seeing them as thieves. But the European settlers grabbed the Native Americans' land, their most important possession. So who were the real thieves? However, in this day and age, it would be futile to think of getting rid of the concept of ownership. But let me return to land ownership. It's a complex issue. For example, should the owner have exclusive control over the rights of way, like traditional footpaths, or the migration routes of wild animals, or the ecologically important wetlands? Should the owner be allowed to destroy the whole lot by building expensive houses everywhere? Or what if the owner discovers hidden treasure that once belonged to the royal family? All such things raise questions of the rights of the owner as opposed to the rights of others, including animals, perhaps. Clearly, divergent views on such questions are a constant source of argument. What did the classical economists say about land ownership? Their positions were often rather ambiguous. Many of them seemed to consider it a necessary evil, and argued that it could not be defended if there was not some obligation to keep and improve the land. This is the concept of stewardship, that the land must be kept in good condition for future generations. But what if the owners were good stewards of their vast estates, but millions were going hungry? The Marxist answer was, and still is, land reform as a means of social justice. And in the 20th century, I mentioned ecological issues just now. Other reasons for legally restricting the rights of landowners have emerged. You can't cut the trees down because it would cause soil erosion that can spoil rivers hundreds of miles away. Pollution, the need to protect biodiversity, things that reduce the level of what we called nature's services to the general public. All have led to more restrictions on landowners' rights, at least in some countries, especially Europe. At the same time, property taxes have steadily increased to pay for essential services offered by the state or local government, such as firefighting. As these threats to the health of our planet get more serious, some people have argued that the ownership of natural capital, forests, wetlands, etc., will more and more be controlled by communal and not by private bodies. For example, the use by multinational companies of native plant varieties for modified crops and new drugs, plants that they seldom paid for in the past, are now increasingly recognized as belonging to the cultures or ecosystems from which they originated. But it seems to me that having the land and its flora and fauna owned by governments is no guarantee that they'll be used wisely, rather than for short-term profit. The evidence is that local ownership protected by law is usually the best answer. Okay, it will soon be time for a break, but before we have our coffee, I will give the answers to the two questions I asked you last time. What are the differences between leasehold and freehold? Essentially, the former allows possession for a limited time, while the latter is a special right granting the full use of real estate for an indeterminate time. In this country, most houses are sold with the land and the house itself freehold, whereas many flats are sold with a lease which was issued by the freeholder to the original leaseholder. The flat is then effectively owned by the leaseholder for an agreed number of years.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.